Before you speak again, ask a harder question than whether your words are true. Ask what your words are doing. Are they healing or cutting? Are they calming anger or feeding it? Are they protecting your soul from trouble or dragging you into conflict you could have avoided? Proverbs does not treat speech as background noise. It treats the mouth as one of the clearest tests of wisdom. That is why this episode is not only about people who gossip loudly, argue online, or say cruel things in anger. It is about the small sentences you barely notice. The message you send because you cannot let an accusation stand. The extra explanation after you already said enough. The joke that makes you look clever while someone else feels smaller. The concern you share that is really gossip in church clothes. The silence you use to punish. The sigh that says more than a paragraph. Proverbs brings all of that into the light. Tonight we are not looking for a magic formula, and we are not pretending words create guaranteed outcomes. We are looking at 7 tests from Proverbs. Too many words. Cutting words. Angry answers. Healing speech. The power of the tongue. The discipline of restraint. And the refusal to carry fuel for conflict. If you let these verses examine you, you may discover that your biggest spiritual problem is not that you do not know enough. It may be that you talk too quickly, too sharply, too often, and too confidently. Welcome to the Proverbs-Path. This is episode 5, 7 Proverbs about your mouth that can save your life. We are working through the book of Proverbs, one theme at a time, letting the text speak on its own terms. The premise is simple. Your words are not neutral. They carry moral weight. They either build or tear down. Learning to speak wisely and learning when not to speak at all may spare you more grief than you realize. In the multitude of words there wanteth not sin, but he that refraineth his lips is wise. This verse draws a direct line between talking too much and sin. Not that every word you speak is sinful, but that when you speak many words, sin is almost certain to find its way in. The wisdom here is remarkably practical. The more you talk, the more likely you are to say something you should not. This is not a command to be silent at all times. It is a warning that talkativeness is spiritually dangerous. A common misunderstanding of this verse is that it condemns all extended speech or forbids teaching, preaching, or explaining. That is not what it says. The book of Proverbs itself contains lengthy discourses on wisdom. The wise teacher in Proverbs speaks at length when the occasion calls for it. The problem is not the length of a speech, but the habit of speaking without restraint. The person who cannot bear silence, who must fill every pause, who offers an opinion on every matter, that person, the proverb says, will inevitably sin with their tongue. The everyday application is the discipline of silence. Before you speak, especially when you are emotionally stirred, ask yourself whether your words are necessary. Most arguments, most confessions we later regret, most words that damage relationships are not said out of malice but out of excessive speaking. You talked yourself into a corner. You said more than you meant. You clarified until you contradicted yourself. The wise person knows when to stop. Consider the next time you're in a disagreement. Your instinct will be to defend yourself at length, to explain, to justify, to make sure the other person understands your position fully. Proverbs chapter 10 verse 19 suggests a different path. Say what needs to be said, then stop. The extra words are where the trouble lives. Sober self-examination. When was the last time you regretted something you said? Trace it back. Was the problem that you spoke at all, or that you kept speaking after you should have stopped? Most of us can identify specific words we wish we could take back, but the pattern beneath those words is often simple. We did not know when to be quiet. This discipline extends beyond conflict. In casual conversation, in meetings, in social settings, the person who talks the most is not usually the wisest. The person who listens carefully and speaks sparingly often carries more weight. Silence, in the Proverbs, is not emptiness. It is the container for wisdom. And learning to refrain your lips is the beginning of learning to speak at all. There is that speaketh like the piercings of a sword, but the tongue of the wise is health. This verse gives us two images side by side. The first is violent, words that pierce like a sword. The second is medicinal, words that bring health. Both come from the same organ. The difference is not in the tongue itself, but in the heart that directs it. The common misunderstanding here is to read this verse as a description of two types of people. Some people are swords, others are healers. But the Proverbs are not assigning fixed categories. They are describing choices. The same person can speak like a sword at noon and like a physician by evening. The question is not what kind of person you are. The question is what kind of speech you will choose in this moment. In practical terms, this means paying attention to the effect of your words, not your intention, your effect. You may have intended only to be honest, only to correct, only to speak the truth, but if your words land like a blade, the damage is real regardless of intent. The wise person learns to speak the truth in a way that does not destroy. This does not mean softening falsehood or avoiding necessary confrontation. It means that the manner of your speech matters as much as the content. Ask yourself honestly, do people generally feel better or worse after talking to you? That is a sobering question, and one that Proverbs chapter 12, verse 18 forces you to consider. If your words consistently wound, even if you believe you are right, and even if the other person is wrong, you are not speaking wisely. The tongue of the wise is health. That is the standard. Consider how you speak about people who are not present, the words you use when describing someone who has wronged you, the tone you take when recounting a disagreement. Are those words health, or are they piercing? The easy answer is to say that you are just being honest about what happened. But honesty and wounding are not the same thing. You can tell the truth in a way that seeks restoration, or you can tell the truth in a way that simply cuts. There is also a positive application here. You have the capacity to bring health with your words. A single sentence of genuine encouragement can change someone's day. A word of thanks, sincerely offered, can strengthen a relationship. A timely apology can begin healing something that seemed broken. The tongue of the wise is health. That is not a description of a special class of people. It is an invitation to you today to choose words that heal rather than wound. A soft answer turneth away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger. This is perhaps the most quoted of the seven, and for good reason. It offers a simple principle with profound consequences. A soft answer does not mean a weak answer. It means a gentle one, measured in tone, deliberate in timing, not matching the heat of the moment with equal heat. The common misunderstanding is to treat this verse as a technique for manipulating others. If you speak softly, the thinking goes, you can calm people down and get what you want. That reduces wisdom to a strategy. But the proverb is not about getting your way. It is about refusing to escalate conflict. The goal is not to win the argument. The goal is to prevent the argument from destroying something precious. In practice, This is extremely difficult. When someone speaks to you with anger, your flesh wants to match their volume and intensity. A soft answer feels like surrender. It feels like you are letting them win. But it is not surrender. It is the refusal to let someone else's anger dictate your response. It is the conscious decision to lower the temperature rather than raise it. Think of the last heated exchange you had. What would have changed if you had answered softly, not falsely, not by agreeing with something untrue, but softly? Most conflicts escalate because both parties are determined to have the last word. The soft answer breaks that cycle. It does not guarantee that the other person will calm down. Sometimes they will take your gentleness as weakness and press harder. But you will not have added fuel to the fire. And that alone is a significant victory in the life of wisdom. The second half of the verse is equally important. Grievous words stir up anger. Grievous words are not necessarily false words. They are harsh words, words spoken with the intent to wound, or simply spoken without care for how they will land. If you find that your presence tends to stir up anger in others, it may be worth examining not what you are saying, but how you are saying it. The content may be correct, while the delivery is destructive. Sober self-examination. When you are angry, what comes out of your mouth? Do you raise your voice? Do you use cutting language? Do you bring up past offenses? Do you make sweeping accusations? The soft answer is not natural to any of us. It must be learned. And it is learned one conversation at a time, usually through failure. But the path of wisdom is the path of learning to answer softly, even when everything in you wants to answer loudly. Pleasant words are as an honeycomb, sweet to the soul and health to the bones. Here, the tone shifts. After warnings about restraint and soft answers, Solomon offers a positive vision. Pleasant words are good for you. They are like honey, not empty flattery, but genuinely sweet and nourishing. And they bring health, literally, to the bones. The misunderstanding to avoid is thinking that pleasant words means always saying what people want to hear. That is not what the text means. Pleasant words in the Proverbs are words that are fitting, gracious, and timely. They are not necessarily comfortable. A wise rebuke, rightly timed and rightly spoken, can be present in the sense that it is welcome to a humble heart. The distinction is not between criticism and praise. The distinction is between speech that builds up and speech that tears down. In daily life, this calls us to cultivate a habit of kind speech. Not artificial positivity, not forced cheerfulness, but genuinely looking for what is good and saying it. Most people are starved for encouragement. They hear criticism constantly, from their supervisors, from their spouses, from their own internal voice. A few pleasant words, sincerely spoken, can be like medicine. The image of honey is important here. Honey is not the main course. It is a treat, a delicacy, something that makes life sweeter. Pleasant words should not be your only diet. There is a time for correction and a time for silence. But if your speech never includes honey, if you never offer a kind word, a word of praise, a word of thanks, a word of genuine appreciation, then your speech is out of balance. The wise person learns to speak words that make others healthier. Consider your closest relationships. When was the last time you said something genuinely kind to your spouse, your child, your parent, your friend? Not because you needed something, but simply because you noticed something good. Pleasant words are a gift. They cost you nothing but attention and intention. And they bring health, the proverb says, to the bones of the one who hears them. This also applies to the way you speak about yourself. The words you say in your own mind, the narrative you rehearse about your own failures and limitations. Pleasant words are not only for others. The wise person learns to speak truth to themselves in a way that is neither harshly critical nor falsely flattering, sweet to the soul, and health to the bones. Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and they that love it shall eat the fruit thereof. This is the most sobering verse in our collection. The tongue, according to this proverb, holds the power of death and life. Not that your words have magical power to create reality out of nothing. The meaning is more concrete and more serious. Words have real consequences. They can destroy a reputation, end a relationship, crush a spirit, or start a war. And they can encourage, restore, reconcile, and build. The common misunderstanding here is the most dangerous one of all 7. In recent decades, this verse has been twisted to support the idea that you can speak things into existence. That if you say positive confessions, you will get wealth, health, and success. That if you speak negatively, you will bring disaster upon yourself. This is not what the text teaches. The Proverbs do not present the tongue as a tool for manipulating reality. They present the tongue as something that produces real effects in the real world through ordinary human means. If you speak falsely about someone, you can destroy their reputation. If you speak recklessly, you can destroy trust. If you speak cruelty, you can wound a soul. That is the kind of death the tongue can bring. It is no less serious for being ordinary, and the life it brings is equally real. A timely word of encouragement can keep someone from despair. An honest word of counsel can redirect a life. A word of forgiveness can restore a relationship that seemed beyond repair. These are not magical effects. They are ordinary human outcomes. But they carry extraordinary weight. They that love it shall eat the fruit thereof. This phrase deserves attention. The people who love to talk, who love the sound of their own voice, who love being the center of conversation, who cannot resist offering their opinion, will experience the consequences of their speech. If you speak much, you will reap much, both the good and the bad. Every word you speak is seed planted in the lives of others, and you will eventually eat what you have grown. Sober self-examination. What kind of fruit has your speech produced? Look at the state of your relationships. Look at the way people respond to you. Look at the conflicts in your life and ask whether your own tongue has been a source of life or death in those situations. This is not about condemnation. It is about honest assessment. The power of the tongue is real, and the fruit of the tongue is unavoidable. Whoso keepeth his mouth and his tongue keepeth his soul from troubles. This verse is a promise, but not the kind we usually want. It does not promise wealth, success, or an easy life. It promises something more valuable and more reliable. Protection from unnecessary trouble. If you guard your mouth, you guard your soul. The common misunderstanding is to read this as a promise that silence will keep you safe from all trouble. That is not true. The righteous suffer. The wise are sometimes persecuted for their faith. Keeping your mouth does not guarantee a trouble-free life, but it does guarantee that you will not bring trouble upon yourself through your own words. Much of the pain in human relationships is self-inflicted. We say things we should not have said, and then we suffer the natural consequences. Proverbs chapter 21 verse 23 offers a way out. Keep your mouth, and you will avoid a great deal of that kind of trouble. In practical terms, this means developing the habit of pausing before speaking, particularly in moments of anger, frustration, or wounded pride. The wisest thing you can do is say nothing, not forever. But until you have regained enough composure to speak without causing harm. Many people have destroyed marriages, friendships, and careers in the space of a single angry outburst. A moment of silence would have saved years of regret. This is not about repression. It is about discipline. You are not pretending not to feel what you feel. You are choosing not to let your feelings dictate your speech. And that choice, made consistently over time, becomes a guard around your life. Consider the kinds of trouble in your life right now. How much of it is directly traceable to something you said? How many of your current difficulties would be reduced or eliminated if you had kept your mouth on a specific occasion? The answer, for most of us, is sobering. We are not in trouble primarily because of what others have done to us. We are in trouble, at least in part, because of what we have said. The positive side of this verse is equally important. Keeping your mouth is not just about avoiding trouble. It is about keeping your soul. The word keep here means to guard, to watch over, to preserve. When you control your tongue, you are not just protecting yourself from external consequences. You are protecting your inner life. The state of your soul is deeply connected to the state of your speech. Where no wood is, there the fire goeth out. So where there is no talebearer, the strife ceaseth. This final proverb uses a vivid image that anyone can understand. Fire needs fuel. Without wood, a fire dies. Without a talebearer, someone who carries gossip, who repeats offenses, who passes along unkind reports, strife dies too. The principle is simple, but its implications are far-reaching. The common misunderstanding is to think this verse applies only to obvious gossip. The person who spreads rumors, who tells secrets, who enjoys passing along damaging information about others. And it certainly includes that. But the category of talebearer is broader than we usually assume. The talebearer is not only the one who starts the rumor, it is also the one who repeats it, who passes it along with a sigh and a prayer request, who keeps the story circulating. If you have ever said, "I am not one to gossip, but you should know," you have likely been a talebearer. The application is searching. Think about the conflicts in your life, past and present. How many of them would have died on their own if no one had kept feeding them with words? How many arguments have been sustained, not by the original disagreement, but by the ongoing conversation about it with third parties? The wise person knows when to let a fire burn out. They do not keep adding wood. They do not revisit old offenses. They do not rehearse grievances in conversation with others. This is especially relevant in the age of instant communication. The opportunities to be a talebearer have multiplied beyond anything Solomon could have imagined. Group chats, social media, email chains. Every forwarded message, every shared screenshot, every comment thread is an invitation to add wood to the fire. Proverbs chapter 26 verse 20 calls you to be the one who refuses to carry the fuel. Sober self-examination. When you hear a negative report about someone you know, what is your first impulse? Do you feel a pull to pass it along? Do you feel important for having the information? Do you tell yourself that others have a right to know? These are the temptations of the talebearer. The wise response is to let the information stop with you. Unless there is a clear duty to speak, a matter of justice, a need for protection, a legitimate reason, the fire goes out when you refuse to add wood. The same principle applies to conflicts you are directly involved in. When you have been wronged, the temptation is to tell everyone except the person who wronged you. You rehearse the offense to friends, to family, to anyone who will listen. But this only keeps the fire burning. The path of wisdom is to address the matter directly with the person involved, or to let it go entirely. The talebearer keeps strife alive. The wise person lets it die. We have walked through 7 proverbs about the mouth. Let us gather them together. Proverbs chapter 10 verse 19 warns that in much speaking, sin finds its way in, and restraint is the wiser path. Proverbs chapter 12 verse 18 reminds us that the tongue can wound like a sword or heal like medicine, and we must choose which kind of speech we will offer. Proverbs chapter 15 verse 1 teaches that a soft answer turns away wrath, while harsh words only fan the flame. Proverbs chapter 16 verse 24 offers the positive vision of pleasant words as honey, sweet to the soul and health to the bones. Proverbs chapter 18 verse 21 confronts us with the sober truth that death and life are in the power of the tongue, and we will eat the fruit of our words. Proverbs chapter 21 verse 23 promises that keeping our mouth keeps our soul from many troubles. And Proverbs chapter 26 verse 20 shows us that without a talebearer, strife dies on its own. Taken together, these verses paint a picture of speech as a spiritual discipline. Your words matter. They are not neutral. They carry moral and practical weight. And the wisdom to use them well is available to anyone who will slow down, listen to the Spirit, and submit their tongue to the Lord. One conversation at a time. The Proverbs do not promise that if you speak wisely, your life will be free of all difficulty. They do not promise that you will never face conflict or misunderstanding. They offer something more modest and more reliable, a path that leads away from unnecessary suffering and towards genuine peace. The mouth is small, but it carries enormous power. That is the sobering truth. But it is also the hopeful truth, because it means that small changes in the way you speak can produce real change in the quality of your life and the lives of those around you. You do not need to master all 7 at once. Choose one. Perhaps this week you will focus on the soft answer. Perhaps you will work on refusing to carry gossip. Perhaps you will simply try to speak fewer words and listen more. The path of wisdom is walked one step at a time, and every step matters. May the Lord give you the grace to hold your tongue when wisdom demands silence, and to speak when wisdom demands words. And may the words of your mouth and the meditation of your heart be acceptable in His sight. Let me first check what's already been written to ensure I don't repeat anything. The existing narration covers Proverbs chapter 10, verse 19, too many words Tobda 12, verse 18, sword verse 18. Sword versus health. Proverbs chapter 15, verse 1. Soft answer. Proverbs chapter 16, verse 24. Pleasant words as honey. Proverbs chapter 18, verse 21. Death and life in tongue. Proverbs chapter 21, verse 23. Keep mouth, keep soul. Proverbs chapter 26, verse 20. No wood. Fire goes out. Recapitulation. I need 4,705 words of new material, 1624 paragraphs, all under 240 words each. No repeated sentences, grounded in the same 7 verses. No new verse anchors unless absolutely necessary. The existing text is approximately 3,300 words. The target is 8,900 total. So 85,600 new words needed. Let me write this. There is a difference between knowing what is right and doing what is right. Every person listening tonight would agree that gossip is wrong, that harsh words cause damage, that a soft answer is better than a sharp one. And yet we continue to speak in ways we know are unwise. This gap between knowledge and action is exactly where Proverbs speaks most powerfully. It does not merely inform you, it calls you. The question is not whether you understand these 7 verses. The question is whether you will obey them when your emotions are high and your patience is low. Consider the physiology of anger. When you are provoked, your body responds before your mind can intervene. Your heart rate rises, your breathing quickens, your muscles tense. Blood moves away from your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that exercises judgment and restraint, and toward your limbs, preparing you for fight or flight. In that state, your ability to choose wise speech is dramatically reduced. This is not an excuse. It is a warning. If you wait until you are angry to decide how you will speak, you have waited too long. The time to decide is now, in the calm, before the provocation comes. This is what Proverbs means when it speaks of wisdom as something you must store up in advance. The wise person does not improvise in the moment of crisis. They have already rehearsed the right response. They have hidden the word in their heart. They have made a decision before the conflict arises that they will answer softly, that they will refrain their lips, that they will not add wood to the fire. And when the moment of testing comes, that prior decision carries them through. Let us examine each of the 7 verses more closely, beginning with the first. Proverbs chapter 10 verse 19 says that in the multitude of words there wanteth not sin. The word wanteth here means lack. There is no lack of sin where words are many. But notice what the verse does not say. It does not say that every word you speak is sinful. It does not say that silence is always better than speech. It says that when words are multiplied, sin will be present. The multiplication of words is the problem, not the existence of words. The warning sign to watch for is the feeling that you must keep talking. If you feel a pressure to fill silence, to explain yourself further, to make sure you have been understood completely, that pressure is a signal that you are approaching the danger zone. The wise person learns to recognize that feeling and to stop. Not because silence is more virtuous, but because the extra words are unlikely to help and very likely to harm. A sober examination of your daily conversations will reveal patterns you may not have noticed. Do you tend to dominate group conversations? Do you feel restless when others are speaking, eager to share your own perspective? Do you find yourself finishing other people's sentences or interrupting to offer your opinion? These are not merely personality quirks. They are indicators of a heart that has not learned the discipline of restraint. The correction is not to become completely silent. That would be a different kind of error. The book of Proverbs does not celebrate the person who never speaks. It celebrates the person who speaks at the right time, in the right measure, with the right heart. The goal is not silence for its own sake. The goal is speech that is intentional, measured, and wise. And that requires the willingness to be quiet when silence is called for. Proverbs chapter 12 verse 18 gives us the image of words that pierce like a sword. Consider what a sword does. It cuts, it separates, it wounds. And the wound it inflicts is not always visible. You cannot see the damage done by a cutting remark, but it is real. The person who receives it will carry it, perhaps for years. They will rehearse it in their mind. They will wonder what they did to deserve it, and sometimes they will never tell you the damage you have done. The common misunderstanding that we have not yet addressed is the belief that sharp words are acceptable if they are true. How many times have you heard someone defend cruel speech by saying, "I was just being honest"? Honesty without love is brutality, and the Proverbs do not honor it. The tongue of the wise is health, not the tongue of the honest, not the tongue of the correct, the tongue of the wise. And wisdom knows that truth can be spoken in a way that heals or in a way that destroys. Here is a practical test. Before you speak a hard truth to someone, ask yourself 3 questions. First, is this necessary? Does this person need to hear this from me? Or am I speaking because I want to relieve my own frustration? Second, is this the right time? There is a season for everything, and not every truth must be spoken in every moment. Third, is this the right manner? Am I speaking in a way that this person can receive? Or am I speaking in a way that will only provoke defensiveness and shame? If you cannot answer all three questions with confidence, it may be wise to wait. The truth will still be true tomorrow, and it may land very differently when spoken with patience and care. The warning sign for this proverb is the pleasure you feel when you deliver a cutting remark. There is a satisfaction in saying exactly what you think, in putting someone in their place, in winning an argument with a perfectly aimed sentence. That satisfaction is a danger signal. If you enjoy the feeling of your words landing like blows, your heart is not in the right place. The wise person does not take pleasure in wounding, even when the wound is justified. Proverbs, chapter 15, verse 1, calls us to the soft answer. We have considered this in the context of anger, but let us go deeper. A soft answer is not only about volume, it is about the orientation of your heart. A soft answer is one that seeks understanding rather than victory. It is speech that aims to connect rather than to conquer. And this is perhaps the most difficult discipline in all of human relationships, because our natural instinct in conflict is to win. Think about the last disagreement you had. What were you actually trying to accomplish? Were you trying to make the other person see your point of view? Were you trying to prove that you were right and they were wrong? Were you trying to protect yourself from blame? Most of our conflicts are driven by these motives, and they all lead to the same outcome. Escalation. The soft answer breaks this pattern by changing the goal. The goal is no longer to win. The goal is to understand, to be understood, and to find a way forward together. The grievous words that stir up anger are not always loud. Sometimes the most grievous words are spoken quietly, with calm cruelty. A spouse who says, "You will never change," in a flat, resigned tone, has spoken grievously. A parent who says, "I am disappointed in you," with cold precision, has stirred up anger, just as surely as if they had shouted. The soft answer is not about decibel level, it is about the presence of grace in your speech. Here is a warning sign that you are about to speak grievously. When you begin a sentence with phrases like, "you always," or "you never," or "the problem with you is," stop. These are almost never words that lead to healing. They are generalizations that condemn rather than specific observations that invite change. The soft answer speaks to the specific moment, not the entire history of the relationship. Proverbs chapter 16, verse 24 offers the sweet alternative. Pleasant words are as an honeycomb, sweet to the soul and health to the bones. Notice that the effect is not merely emotional, it is physical. Health to the bones. There is a connection between the words you receive and the state of your body. This is not mysticism, it is wisdom. Encouragement reduces stress. Kindness lowers blood pressure. A word of genuine appreciation can change the chemical state of the person who receives it. The misunderstanding we have not fully addressed is the belief that pleasant words are weak words. That to speak pleasantly is to be soft, naive, or unwilling to confront reality. Nothing could be further from the truth. It takes far more strength to speak kindly to someone who has wronged you than it does to speak harshly. It takes more self-control to offer a word of encouragement when you're frustrated than to lash out. Pleasant words are not the words of the weak. They are the words of those who have mastered themselves. The practical application is to develop the habit of speaking pleasant words as a regular practice, not only when you feel like it. Set a goal. Every day, say something genuinely kind to at least one person. Not flattery, not manipulation. A sincere word of appreciation. Notice something good and say it out loud. This is not natural for most people. It must be cultivated. But over time, it changes the atmosphere of your relationships. Consider how rarely people hear genuinely pleasant words. Most of your day is filled with neutral or negative communication. Instructions, corrections, complaints, requests, small talk. How many truly pleasant words do you hear in a typical week? And how many do you speak? If the answer is very few, you have identified an area where your speech can become more like honey and less like vinegar. Proverbs chapter 18 verse 21 brings us to the most serious of the 7. Death and life are in the power of the tongue. We have addressed the common misunderstanding about speaking things into existence, but there is another misunderstanding that must be corrected. Some people hear this verse and become afraid of their own words. They become paralyzed, terrified that they might accidentally speak death over someone. This fear is not helpful, and it is not what the proverb intends. The power of the tongue is real, but it is not magical. You do not have the power to curse someone with your words. You do not have the power to bless them into prosperity. What you have is the power to influence, to encourage, to wound, to comfort, to deceive, to restore. These are ordinary powers, but they are not small. A single sentence can change the direction of a life. A word spoken at the right moment can save someone from despair. A word spoken carelessly can push them toward it. The fruit you eat is the natural consequence of your speech, not a supernatural reward or punishment. If you speak kindly, you will tend to have kind relationships. If you speak harshly, you will tend to have conflicted relationships. If you speak truthfully, people will learn to trust you. If you speak falsely, they will not. This is not karma. It is cause and effect built into the fabric of human relationships by a wise creator. The warning sign for this verse is when you find yourself using your words to manipulate. When you say things specifically to produce a reaction, to make someone feel guilty, to control their behavior, to punish them for disappointing you. This is the tongue being used for death, even if the words themselves are not obviously cruel. A sigh can be a weapon. Silence can be a weapon. A carefully timed comment can be a weapon. The tongue is not only the organ of speech, it is the instrument of the heart. Proverbs chapter 21 verse 23 promises that keeping your mouth and your tongue keeps your soul from troubles. But we must be honest about how difficult this is. There are moments when staying silent feels impossible. When you have been wronged and your soul cries out for vindication. When you have been misunderstood and every fiber of your being wants to explain. When you have been accused falsely and you long to defend yourself. In those moments, keeping your mouth feels like a kind of death. And it is. It is the death of your pride. It is the death of your need to be right. It is the death of your desire to control what others think of you. And that is exactly why it is so powerful. When you keep your mouth in a moment of provocation, you are not merely avoiding trouble, you are dying to yourself. And in that death, there is life. The practical discipline is to develop a pause. Before you respond to any provocation, take a breath. Count to 5 if you need to. Ask yourself whether your response will make things better or worse. Most of the time, the answer will be clear. And in those moments, the wisest response is often the simplest. I need to think about that before I respond. Let me take a moment. Those few seconds of delay can save you years of regret. Here is a warning sign that you need to practice this discipline. If you regularly regret things you have said, if you frequently apologize for your words, if you have a pattern of speaking first and thinking second, then you know where your work needs to be done. The path of wisdom does not begin with mastering all 7 verses at once. It begins with recognizing your own pattern of failure and addressing that specific area. Proverbs, chapter 26, verse 20, closes our collection with the image of fire and wood. Where no wood is, the fire goeth out. The talebearer is the one who carries the fuel. But we must ask ourselves a deeper question. Why do we carry fuel? Why do we repeat negative reports about others? Why do we share gossip under the guise of concern? The answer is uncomfortable. We do it because it makes us feel important. We do it because it gives us a sense of superiority. We do it because we enjoy the momentary bond of shared judgment. When you say, "I am not one to gossip, but you should know what so-and-so did," you are lying to yourself. You are, in fact, one to gossip. That is exactly what you are doing. The phrase is a mask that allows you to indulge the sin while pretending to resist it. The wise person does not need that mask. They simply refuse to carry the tale. The application for your daily life is to examine your conversations for patterns of tale-bearing. Do you regularly discuss the faults of others when they are not present? Do you feel a rush of energy when you have new information about someone's failure? Do you forward messages, share screenshots, or repeat stories that you would not want repeated about yourself? These are all forms of adding wood to the fire. And the solution is not complicated, though it is difficult. When someone begins to share a negative report, you can gently redirect. You can say, "I would rather not discuss this without the person being here." You can change the subject. You can simply refuse to engage. The fire goes out when you refuse to carry fuel, and over time, people will learn that you are not a safe person to gossip with. They will stop bringing you tales, and your life will be quieter and more peaceful as a result. Let us consider the cumulative effect of these 7 proverbs on a single human life. Imagine a person who has truly internalized these teachings. They speak fewer words, but the words they speak carry weight. They refuse to wound with their tongue, even when they could win an argument. They answer softly when provoked, not because they are weak, but because they are strong enough to control themselves. They offer pleasant words generously, knowing that such words are medicine to those who hear them. They understand that their tongue carries real power, and they use that power carefully. They keep their mouth when silence is called for, even when everything in them wants to speak. And they refuse to carry tales, letting conflicts die instead of feeding them. That person is not perfect. They still fail. They still speak when they should not. They still wound when they intended to help. But they are on the path, and the path is what matters. The Proverbs do not demand perfection. They demand progress. They call you to take one step, and then another, and then another, trusting that the God who gave you a tongue can also teach you to use it wisely. There is a particular danger that we must address before we conclude. The danger of using these proverbs to judge others rather than to examine yourself. It is possible to hear a teaching about the tongue and immediately think of someone else who needs to hear it. Your spouse, your coworker, your friend, your enemy. You nod along thinking, yes, they really need to hear this. And in that moment, you have missed the point entirely. The Proverbs are not a weapon to be wielded against others. They are a mirror to be held up to yourself. When you read Proverbs chapter 10, verse 19, do not think of the talkative person in your life. Think of your own words. When you read Proverbs chapter 12, verse 18, do not think of the person who wounded you with their speech. Think of how you have wounded others. When you read Proverbs chapter 15, verse 1, do not think of the person who answered you harshly. Think of your own harsh answers. The path of wisdom begins with self-examination, not with the examination of others. This is perhaps the hardest part of the wisdom tradition. It is always easier to see the speck in your brother's eye than the log in your own. But the Proverbs force you to look inward. They do not let you escape into critique of others. They hold up the mirror and say, look at yourself. What kind of speech comes out of your mouth? What fruit have your words produced? Where do you need to change? And if you are honest, you will find that you have work to do. We all do. There is no one who has mastered the tongue. There is no one who has never spoken a word they regret. There is no one whose speech is always wise and always timely. This is not cause for despair. It is cause for humility. And humility is the beginning of wisdom. Let us go deeper into the practical realities of applying these verses in the specific contexts of your life. Consider the home. The people closest to you often receive your worst speech. You show patience to strangers and harshness to your family. You guard your tongue at work and let it loose at home. This is a common pattern, and it is destructive. The Proverbs apply most urgently to the relationships that matter most. If you speak wisely to everyone except your spouse and your children, you have not learned wisdom at all. The correction is to treat your home as the primary training ground for wise speech. Practice the soft answer with your family before you try it with your enemies. Offer pleasant words to your children before you offer them to your colleagues. Guard your tongue with your spouse before you guard it with your boss. The home is where the Proverbs come to life, or where they die on the page. Consider the workplace. The pressure to speak in certain ways at work is intense. You must advocate for yourself. You must navigate politics. You must protect your position. And the temptation is to use your tongue as a tool of advancement rather than a tool of wisdom. But the Proverbs call you to something higher. Even in the competitive environment of work, you are called to speak truth, to refuse gossip, to answer softly, to let your words be health. This does not mean you will always be rewarded for wise speech in the workplace. Sometimes speaking wisely will cost you. Sometimes refusing to gossip will make you less popular. Sometimes answering softly will be interpreted as weakness. But the Proverbs are not promising that wisdom leads to worldly success. They are promising that wisdom leads to life, and life is more than promotions and paychecks. Consider the church. The community of believers is supposed to be a place where wise speech flourishes. But too often, it is a place where gossip, criticism, and harsh words are common. The talebearer is active in the pews. The sword tongue sits in the Bible study. The person who cannot refrain from speaking dominates every meeting. The Proverbs call the church to a higher standard. If we cannot speak wisely among ourselves, how will the world believe our message? The application is to hold yourself and your fellow believers to the standard of these Proverbs, not with harsh judgment, but with gentle accountability. When you hear a talebearer, gently redirect. When you hear harsh speech, gently correct. When you see someone struggling with their tongue, gently encourage them. The church should be a school of wise speech, not a sanctuary for careless words. Consider your relationship with God. The words you speak to God in prayer are also subject to these proverbs. Are your prayers full of empty repetition? Do you use many words thinking you will be heard for your much speaking? Do you pray with a sense of entitlement, as if God owes you a hearing? The proverbs about the tongue apply even to the way you address your Creator. Let your words be few, and let them be sincere. At the same time, the Proverbs teach you to speak to God with confidence. The same tongue that brings health to others can bring honest prayer to God. You can speak to Him with candor, with lament, with joy, with thanksgiving. The discipline of wise speech does not mean that your prayers must be formal or restrained. It means that your prayers must be real. Let your words to God be the truest words you speak. One more misunderstanding must be addressed directly. Some will hear these proverbs and conclude that the solution is to simply stop talking altogether. They will retreat into silence, believing that if speech is dangerous, the safest path is to abandon it entirely. This is not wisdom. This is fear. And fear is not the path of the Proverbs. The book of Proverbs does not call you to silence. It calls you to wise speech. There is a time to speak, and there is a time to be silent. The wise person knows the difference. If you refuse to speak when speech is called for, you are not being wise. You are being cowardly. The father must speak correction to his child. The friend must speak truth to his friend. The prophet must speak the word of the Lord. Silence is not always virtue. Sometimes it is dereliction. The goal is not to eliminate speech. The goal is to purify it, to learn to speak in a way that reflects the character of God, to let your words be few but weighty, to let them be gentle but true, to let them be kind but not weak, to let them be honest but not cruel. This is the path of wisdom, and it is a path that you can walk one conversation at a time with the help of the Spirit. There is a promise embedded in these proverbs that we have not yet explored. It is the promise that wise speech becomes easier with practice. The person who disciplines their tongue day after day will find, over time, that the discipline becomes less burdensome. What once required great effort becomes habitual. What once felt impossible becomes natural, not perfectly, not without occasional failure, but progressively. The path of wisdom is a path of growth. This is because wisdom is not merely a set of rules to follow. It is a way of being that transforms you from the inside out. When you practice wise speech, your heart changes. You become the kind of person who naturally speaks wisely. The Proverbs are not just instructions, they are formation. They shape your character over time, making you more like the wise person they describe. So take heart. If your tongue has been a source of trouble, if you have wounded others with your words, if you have a pattern of speaking first and regretting later, you are not beyond hope. The Proverbs are not given to condemn you. They are given to guide you. The path is open. The first step is simply to acknowledge where you are and to ask for the grace to change. And that grace is freely given to all who ask. Let us consider one final practical exercise. Take one of these 7 proverbs each day for the next week. On Monday, meditate on Proverbs chapter 10, verse 19. Watch your words throughout the day and notice when you are speaking too much. On Tuesday, meditate on Proverbs chapter 12, verse 18. Pay attention to the effect of your words on others. On Wednesday, meditate on Proverbs chapter 15, verse 1. Practice the soft answer in every interaction. On Thursday, meditate on Proverbs chapter 16, verse 24. Speak pleasant words intentionally. On Friday, meditate on Proverbs chapter 18, verse 21. Consider the power your words carry. On Saturday, meditate on Proverbs chapter 21, verse 23. Practice keeping your mouth when you want to speak. On Sunday, meditate on Proverbs chapter 26, verse 26, verse 20. Refuse to carry any tale. This kind of focused practice can change the way you speak in a single week. Not because the week itself is magical, but because intentional attention to your speech, guided by the wisdom of Scripture, produces real change. The Word of God is living and active, and these 7 proverbs, applied deliberately, can begin to transform the way you use your tongue. You may find that the week is difficult. You may discover habits of speech you did not know you had. You may fail repeatedly. That is expected. The goal is not a perfect week. The goal is a week of awareness, a week of paying attention, a week of inviting the Spirit to convict you and to teach you. That week, even if it is full of failure, will be a week of growth. And if you continue this practice beyond the week, if you return to these proverbs again and again, you will find that your speech changes slowly over time. The changes may be so gradual that you do not notice them yourself, but others will notice. The people closest to you will sense that something is different. They will feel safer in your presence. They will trust your words more. They will be healthier because of your speech. That is the fruit of the tongue. Not wealth, not success, not a trouble-free life, but healthier relationships. Deeper trust, greater peace. The kind of fruit that makes life worth living. And that fruit is available to you, starting today, starting with the next word you speak. May God give you the grace to choose wisely.